If there's one thing that most football fans know about Forest Green Rovers, it is their green credentials. Acquired by green energy industrialist and climate activist Dale Vince in 2010, Forest Green became the world's first vegan football club in 2015, and 3 years later, they were declared both the world's first ever carbon-neutral football club by the United Nations and the world's greenest football club by FIFA. The Green Army, as they are rather aptly nicknamed, serve only vegan food and drink at the club's stadium and training ground. The club runs on 100% renewable energy, 20% of it coming from solar panels on the stadium's roof, and 80% from Vince's nearby windmills, and their pitch is the only entirely organic one on the planet. Even the club's shirts are made out of coffee grounds and recycled plastic. If there's one thing that most football fans don't know about Forest Green Rovers, it's probably where the hell it is. Even prospective players have admitted to having to take to Google Maps in order to find out where the club is based when Forest Green have come in to sign them. Nailsworth, the tiny town in Gloucestershire where Forest Green are based, is home to about 6,000 people, leading some to describe Forest Green as the smallest club in the history of the English Football League. In Vince's first season at Forest Green, the club averaged fewer than 1,000 fans at their home games, and even in League One, it was only the large away followings of the likes of Derby, Ipswich, Portsmouth and Sheffield Wednesday, which took their average over 3,000. For all of the jibes and barbs from opposition fans though, whether that be chants about their veganism, environmentalism or modest following, no one could argue with Forest Green's results. In the space of 12 years, Forest Green went from the verge of bankruptcy and ceasing to exist, only handed a temporary reprieve from relegation to the 6th tier of English football due to Salisbury City's enforced relegation in 2010, to winning promotion to the Sky Bet League One, just 2 divisions below the Premier League, as League Two champions in 2022. For a club that only played non-league football for the first 128 years of their existence, it was a monumental achievement. They were the toast of the football world. In 2022, FIFA made the journey to the Cotswolds to produce an hour-long documentary about Forest Green's success, entitled Another Way, which is the name of the road where Forest Green's The New Lawn Stadium is based. That was just 2 years ago. Since then, Forest Green have suffered back-to-back relegations from League One back down to the National League, finishing bottom of League One last season and bottom of League Two in the season just gone. Over 2 seasons, the Green Army have won 17, drawn 18, and lost an incredible 57 games, scoring just 75 goals and conceding 167 in the process. Somewhat ironically, the one thing that wasn't sustainable at the new lawn appears to have been Forest Green Rovers' success. So just what on earth is going on? What caused Forest Green Rovers to be so wildly successful over a 12-year period, and how was it all undone in the space of just 24 months? Well, that's what today's video is all about. So sit back, relax, and join me on a journey to... where is it again? Oh yeah, that's right, the Cotswolds, as we take a look at the meteoric rise and catastrophic fall of Forest Green Rovers, where it has all gone wrong, and what the future holds for this one-of-a-kind club. On the collar of the Forest Green Rovers shirt, there are 3 stars, 2 of them coloured in and 1 of them greyed out. That's not to reflect the club's rating on FIFA, but their achievements and ambitions. The first star is filled in to represent Forest Green's promotion from the National League to the EFL for the first time in 2017. The second has been filled in since 2022, representing the club's rise from League 2 to League 1 for the first time. And the third is to symbolise Forest Green's ultimate goal of promotion to the Championship, hence why it is still greyed out. A mission statement on the club's website reads, quote, "1 star remains greyed out, indicating our next step to reach the Championship. It will be an exciting journey, so stay with us for the ride." End quote. Forest Green hit a bump in the road on that journey in 2023 with relegation from League One. This season has felt more like a head-on collision with a freight train. The stars on the Forest Green shirt have been mocked by rival fans online, especially in light of recent events, but they reflect Dale Vince's ambition. When he stepped in to save Forest Green in 2010, the club was on its knees. Forest Green have spent most of their existence competing between the 8th and 12th tiers of the English football pyramid, essentially playing park football. The 1981-82 season was a historic one for Forest Green, as they not only won promotion to the Southern League for the first time, at step 7 of the English football pyramid, they also went to Wembley and beat Rainworth Miners Welfare 3-0 in the final of the FA Vase. In the late 80s, Forest Green rebranded themselves as Stroud FC in an effort to raise their profile and expand. Whilst Nailsworth has a population of only 6,000 people, Stroud, which is about 10 minutes down the road, is the second largest town in Gloucestershire. The town itself still only has a population of about 13,500, but the wider Stroud district, which takes its name, is home to over 100,000 people. Nonetheless, changing their name did little to improve Forest Green's fortunes, and in 1992, they reverted back to being Forest Green Rovers. In 1995, Forest Green were transferred to the Southern Football League Southern Division, which, unlike the name change, would prove to be a catalyst for an upturn in their fortunes. In 1997 and 1998, Forest Green won back-to-back promotions, climbing into the Conference, or the National League as it is now. In the 2004-05 season, Forest Green finished inside the relegation zone, but avoided relegation after Northwich Victoria, who finished 9 points above them, were kicked out of the league due to concerns surrounding their stadium. Forest Green left the lawn ground after 116 years in 2006, moving to the appropriately named The New Lawn Stadium, just 400 metres away from their old ground. The new lawn took 12 months to build, cost approximately £3 million, and has a capacity of 5,147, 2,000 of which is seated. The new lawn was built with the Football League in mind, since Forest Green's old ground wouldn't have complied with Football League regulations, but instead, they went in the opposite direction. The club was beset by financial problems throughout the late 2000s, culminating in a desperate fundraising campaign to try and raise £250,000. It was existential for Forest Green, who were relegated from the conference on goal difference in the 2009-10 season, before being handed yet another reprieve, this time due to Salisbury City's own financial woes, which saw them automatically demoted 2 divisions, and Forest Green temporarily saved. After the club failed to raise £250,000 and failed to attract any new owners, despite taking out an advert in the Financial Times, it looked as though they were going to go to the wall. The situation was so desperate that Forest Green twice launched something called GRASS. No, not like that, Snoop. GRASS was an acronym for Give Regularly to Assist Squad Sponsorship. Basically, it was a targeted fundraising campaign, with all money donated by supporters ring-fenced for player wages, in an effort to raise just a measly £2,000 a month. That should give you a decent idea of the size of the hole that Forest Green Rovers were in. At the 11th hour, in August 2010, Forest Green announced that local businessman Dale Vince had invested what they described as a sizable sum into the club, ensuring their survival and putting an end to a series of winding up orders issued by HMRC. At the time, Vince claimed that it wasn't a full-blown takeover, stating, quote, "I'm just joining with the people there, the fans, the directors, and everyone else that's been making the club what it is today." End quote. Even if that was Vince's initial intention, it soon became clear that it wouldn't be the case. In the 2010-11 season, the first following Vince's investment, Forest Green were almost relegated again, finishing just 2 points above relegated Altrincham, and level on points, with a goal difference which was only 2 goals superior than Southport's, who would have been relegated that season had Rushden and Diamonds not folded. It was at that point that Vince became much more directly involved. Vince is an interesting character. A self-styled hippie, he joined the New Age traveller movement in the United Kingdom after leaving school at the age of 15. When he wasn't travelling between free music festivals, Vince was protesting against US nuclear missiles being stationed on British soil or having a standoff with the police at the 1985 Battle of the Beanfield. In the early 1990s, Vince became interested in renewable energy after coming across Britain's first wind farm. He founded Renewable Energy Company, solid name, in 1995, the company that would go on to become Eco-Tricity, and launched his first wind turbine in 1996. Ecotricity has since grown to become the UK's largest 100% green energy supplier, generating almost £350 million in revenue as of 2022, up from just £70 million in 2014. What sets Ecotricity apart from most other green energy suppliers is their mission statement to heavily reinvest their profits into building yet more wind farms and solar parks, expanding their operations, increasing the supply of renewable electricity, and reducing Britain's reliance on fossil fuels. Vince had an estimated net worth of around £100 million when he invested in Forest Green Rovers 14 years ago, and that's likely to have risen significantly since then. But he says that he doesn't care about money, claiming that it hasn't changed him, only what he can do. What he has done is throw his weight and money behind several protest movements, MPs, and political parties. Vince is probably best known to the general public for his donations to Just Stop Oil. He was believed to be JSO's biggest donor, as well as providing financial support for groups like Extinction Rebellion, Greenpeace, and Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, before reversing his support, describing Just Stop Oil, whose methods he had previously endorsed, going so far as to join them on a demonstration and match any public donations they receive for a period of time, as pointless and counterproductive. It was a very sudden U-turn, curiously, which some suspected may have been influenced by the Labour Party. Vince, through Ecotricity, has donated roughly £2.5 million to Labour over the last 10 years, including £1 million over the last 2 years alone. It makes Ecotricity one of the party's 4 largest recent donors, alongside Gary Lubner, the boss of Autoglass, David Sainsbury, whose great-grandfather established the supermarket chain which bears his surname, and Fran Perrin, who is David Sainsbury's daughter. Vince's decision to stop funding JSO and similar movements coincided with an announcement that he would be switching his support to the Labour Party, who had previously been attacked by the Conservatives for accepting money from Vince owing to his links to JSO. Previously, Vince had donated to both Labour and the Greens, as well as welcoming then Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, who had much more ambitious climate commitments than the current Labour leadership, to Forest Green Stadium during his campaign trail in 2019. Vince has also previously been outspoken about his support for the Palestinian cause, flying the Palestine flag at Forest Green Games, and welcoming the head of the Palestinian mission to the United Kingdom, Hussam Zumlot, to the new Lawn Stadium in 2022. Earlier this month, the Daily Mail had to issue an apology to Vince and pay him substantial damages after wrongly alleging that he had voiced support for Hamas. Vince's increased influence at Forest Green after that first season was evident. It started in 2011, when the club announced that they would no longer be serving red meat to their players on performance and health grounds. That's not particularly unusual, at least at a higher level, but a few weeks later, Forest Green announced that if it wasn't good enough for their players, then why should it be good enough for their fans? Removing red meat and sausages, and therefore beef burgers and pork hot dogs, from the menu at the stadium. It wasn't long before all meat products were dropped, followed by fish, and in late 2015, Forest Green became the world's first vegan football club. Months later, it made national headlines when 2 Forest Green players, midfielder Sam Wedgbury and forward-turned-podcaster John Parkin, were snapped munching on a pepperoni pizza outside of a chain of Greggs. Though the story received plenty of press attention, Forest Green players aren't actually required to go vegan. They are allowed to eat whatever they like, within reason of course, given that they are professional athletes outside of the club. It's just anything that Vince funds, so primarily in the canteen at Forest Green's training ground and on the concourse at the New Lane, that exclusively vegan products are served. According to Forest Green, no player has ever turned them down because of the policy, although I don't suppose that they would admit that that was the reason, and several players have chosen to change their diets outside of club premises of their own volition. The installation of solar panels at Forest Green Stadium, the ground coffee and recycled plastic kits, and the electric charging stations in the club car park followed. On the pitch, meanwhile, Vince also became much more heavily involved. In a literal sense, Forest Green became the first club in the world with a fully organic pitch, but more importantly, from a football perspective, Vince had a hand in implementing a more modern, progressive, and data-driven approach to training and recruitment. According to Vince himself, Forest Green were able to use some of the same models of statistical analysis that eco-ethos used in the energy sector to gain an advantage over fellow non-league clubs in the National League. No doubt, an injection of cash also helped. Salisbury's Jamie Turley, Exeter's James Norwood, and Aldershot's Jamie Collins were among Forest Green's ambitious recruitment in the 2011-12 season as the club climbed to 10th in the National League, a feat which they replicated in the following campaign. In the summer of 2013, manager Dave Hockaday left the club by mutual consent, his next job, rather bizarrely, coming at Championship Leeds United, and he was replaced by Adrian Pennock, who had spent the last few years working as a first-team coach under Tony Pulis at Stoke City. Under Pennock, Forest Green came within a hair's breadth of reaching the EFL for the first time, finishing 5th and losing a playoff semi-final against rivals Bristol Rovers in 2015, before finishing 2nd, behind another local rival, Cheltenham Town, in 2016, and going on to lose the playoff final at Wembley 3-1 against Grimsby Town, who finished 4th that season, 9 points behind them. Pennock was sacked just 1 week before Forest Green's 2015-16 playoff campaign, owing to a poor run of league form, and over the summer, the club appointed Mark Cooper. In Cooper's first season, Forest Green actually slipped to 3rd place in the league, but this time they won the playoffs, overcoming Tranmere Rovers by 3-1 at Wembley Stadium, in front of an 18,801 strong attendance, the vast majority of whom were cheering on their opponents. Cooper, formerly of Notts County, Swindon and Peterborough United, brought stability to Forest Green, and after surviving by a solitary point in their first ever season in the EFL, they finished 5th in their second, only 5 points off the automatic promotion places. Tranmere exerted their revenge, beating Forest Green 2-1 on aggregate in the semi-finals, but it gave the Green Army a lot of confidence moving forward. In May 2018, Vince had poached Richard Hughes from Everton as a head of recruitment, and after just 18 months, he was promoted to the role of director of football. It was probably the best decision that the club ever made, followed, not that far behind, by the appointment of Rob Edwards in 2021. Under Hughes, Forest Green had what was described as a broken toy recruitment policy, which maybe isn't the most flattering of terms, but it boiled down to handing once promising players, who might not have got offers from any other EFL clubs, a chance to prove their worth. Ebu Adams, for example, who had joined Norwich City in the Premier League in 2015, but only ever made a solitary appearance for the Canaries, joined Forest Green from non-league Ebbsfleet United, and was a revelation during his 3 seasons at the New Lawn. Following those 3 outstanding campaigns in the Cotswolds, Adams joined Cardiff City, and he won promotion from League One on loan at Derby County last season. There was, of course, an economic incentive for this transfer strategy. Damaged goods tend to come with a discounted price tag, if we want to stick with that analogy, but it also meant that Forest Green were recruiting young, hungry, and, once at least, talented players who had a point to prove. The 2020-21 season, blighted by COVID, saw Forest Green make the playoffs again, this time losing in the cruelest fashion imaginable, as Newport County struck in the 119th minute of the second leg to decide the tie. The appointment of Rob Edwards, formerly of Telford United in England under-16s, proved to be the icing on the cake. There would be no need for the playoffs this time around, as Forest Green led the League Two table virtually all season before sealing the title with a 2-2 draw away at Mansfield Town on the final day. It was a surreal moment for Forest Green fans, who had come so close to losing their club entirely in 2010, to be promoted to a league where they would be competing against former champions of English football like Ipswich, Derby, Sheffield Wednesday, and Portsmouth on a level playing field. It was also, however, the moment at which their journey would peak. Just 4 days after the sheer euphoria of winning the League Two title and reaching League One for the first time in the history of the club, head coach Rob Edwards accepted a job offer from Watford. Vince, who had previously rubbished the rumours, was angered at how the deal was done, accusing Watford of speaking to Edwards before approaching the club, and Edwards of having entered into negotiations with the Hornets without informing him. Edwards' time at Watford, like most Watford managers in all fairness, didn't last long, but after the Hornets sacked him, he took charge of their rivals Luton Town, winning an unlikely promotion to the Premier League via the Championship playoffs. Forest Green appointed Ian Birchnell, the man who replaced Graham Potter at Östersund in Sweden, as Edwards' replacement, luring him away from Notts County. Stepping up to League One was always likely to prove tough for Forest Green, even if Edwards had stuck around, but as if things weren't already difficult enough, at the end of the 2021-22 season, top scorer Matty Stevens ruptured his ACL, ruling him out for at least the first half of Forest Green's debut campaign in League One. Victory away at Bristol Rovers on the opening day perhaps gave the Green Army some false hope, as it would prove to be one of only 6 victories all season. Birchnell was dismissed on January 25th after a run of 7 games without a win, but it meant that his replacement, Duncan Ferguson, inherited a whole raft of signings that had just been approved by Birchnell only 6 days before the transfer window slammed shut. That was particularly problematic because Birchnell and Ferguson had completely contrasting styles and different ideas of how football should be played. Ferguson's unveiling went viral on social media. The contrast between a vegan football club and a man who used to eat Premier League centre-backs every weekend was a recipe, if you'll pardon the pun, for many a joke. At his first press conference, when quizzed on his green credentials, Ferguson noted, quite rightly, that the planet is heating up and we've all got to do our bit. When he stated that he'd never tried any vegan food, Vince was quick to point out that he most likely had, informing the former Scottish international that chips were, in fact, vegan. Whereas Birchnell's football was progressive and possession-based, Ferguson just wanted to make Forest Green tough to beat. He had done that in 2 interim stints in charge of Everton, but getting a tune out of the bottom place side in League One proved to be a far greater task. Forest Green won just 1 of Ferguson's 18 games in charge, losing 14 of them, and finishing 17 points behind Accrington Stanley in 23rd, let alone survival. Just a few months after Edwards left to join Watford, Director of Football Richard Hughes also departed, in a move to League One rivals Portsmouth. It's difficult to overstate Hughes' importance to Forest Green, but since he left, they have suffered back-to-back relegations to the National League. Meanwhile, Portsmouth just returned to the Championship for the first time in over a decade, after running away with the League One title and losing only 5 games all season. Any club would have found it difficult to replace Edwards and Hughes, but to replace them both, within a matter of months, before stepping up to the highest level that they've ever played at, and for a club the size of Forest Green, well, it should be no great shock that it proved to be a task too great. Ferguson was dismissed at the end of last season, probably much to his own relief, just 6 months after signing a 5-year contract, and replaced by David Horseman. In the interim period, between Ferguson's departure and Horseman's appointment, Forest Green's academy manager Hannah Dingley took caretaker charge of the first team. Effectively, that amounted to taking first team, rather than academy training sessions, during pre-season until Ferguson's successor was appointed. Even though it was only a short-term arrangement, it made Dingley the first woman ever to have officially occupied the role of head coach of a men's team within the English Football League. This received a lot of attention and a fair amount of criticism when, 2 weeks later, and after just 2 pre-season friendlies in charge of the first team, David Horseman got the job and Dingley returned to her role as academy manager. TalkSport pundit and globally renowned intellectual Gabby Agbonlahor called Vince, and I quote, an attention-seeking moron, and said that it was, quote, obviously a PR stunt. Now, there are lots of things to criticise about Forest Green over the last 2 seasons, otherwise, they wouldn't have suffered back-to-back relegations, but both Vince and Forest Green made it explicitly clear that Dingley had been put in charge of the first team on an interim basis, and that they didn't think that it was a big deal that should have received so much national attention. In Vince's own words, he said, quote, it was a very simple decision. Hannah was the most qualified person at the club for the job, nothing else came into frame. End quote. That makes sense, given that Dingley has a UEFA Pro licence and has been the academy manager at Forest Green since 2019. The alternative, if you think that allowing Dingley to take first-team training sessions was a PR stunt, would have been to put a less qualified man in interim charge, overlooking her for no other reason than the fact that she's a woman. Just as an aside, and far be it from me to question the eternal wisdom of Sir Gabriel of Agbonlahor, but him calling anyone else, quote, an attention-seeking moron, is a little bit like the people behind the OceanGate submersible's mission to view the Titanic, accusing anyone else of exhibiting a reckless disregard for basic maritime safety regulations. Horseman was the former Southampton B team coach, as Forest Green took yet another chance on a relatively inexperienced head coach, but he only lasted until December. Despite having a decent budget and wage bill by League 2 standards, Forest Green were bottom of the division. Horseman won just 7 of his 29 games in charge, but if you think that's bad, Dale Vince said hold my quinoa salad and broccoli smoothie and appointed Troy Deeney as player manager. As anyone who has ever listened to Troy Deeney, watched Troy Deeney, or just sort of vaguely glanced at Troy Deeney's Wikipedia page could have told you, that proved to be an absolute car crash. Some of Forest Green's performances under Deeney weren't actually that bad, although they still failed to win any of their 6 games during his mere 30 days in charge, but off the pitch, Deeney conducted himself with all of the grace and decorum of a reversing dump truck without any tyres on.
Oh my god.
Enjoy the money. I hope it makes you very happy. Dear Lord, what a sad little life, Jane.
Beginning a press conference with the words, "The amount of nonsense that you have to deal with at this place, from players by the way, is embarrassing," is always a dangerous game, but Deeney surmounted things by calling his players babies, accusing their football of being more boring than the Antiques Roadshow, before apologising to any fans of the Antiques Roadshow, and finally by laying into right-back Fankety Dabo in what felt like the most scathing and ill-judged comments of all. Deeney told reporters, and I quote, "Dabo was poor and awful again, and I've just told him that he will not be playing on Tuesday. He's not been good for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks. I've just told him in front of everyone. 6 months ago, that kid had a kick to go to the Premier League. Now he won't get a game in the National League. So, is that me or him? He has pure ability, but he gets run every game and never makes a tackle, and when the ball comes to him, he looks like he kicks it with his shin pads." End quote. Surprisingly, Deeney's comments didn't inspire his players to run through brick walls for him. In fact, some of them apparently weren't best pleased, what with them being human beings and all. Vince forced Deeney to issue an apology, though the Forest Green owner is hardly immune from having made unfavourable and arguably unhelpful comments about his own players as well. At a fans forum where, to his credit, Vince regularly fields questions from supporters, the Forest Green owner responded to one supporter's comments that Forest Green players Ross Doohan and Amadou Bakayoko were, quote, "the worst goalkeeper and striker in the world," by stating that the club's view, quote, "probably wasn't dissimilar," end quote. As head coach, Deeney's relationship with the players had broken down though, so after 30 days, he was replaced by veteran EFL boss Steve Cotterill. Forest Green's form actually picked up significantly under Cotterill, inspiring confidence ahead of next season if he can be retained, as appears to be the case. But by that stage, it was too little too late. 5 wins from their last 11 games couldn't lift Forest Green off the foot of the table, albeit it meant that they were only 3 points from safety by the end of the campaign. Ultimately, Forest Green have been punished for their recklessness and instability. Replacing Edwards and Hughes was always going to be tough, but the reality is, over the last 2 years, they have had 6 different managers, excluding caretaker bosses. What's more, there has been no rhyme or reason to those appointments. Birchnell looked to get the ball down and play neat and tidy possession football. Ferguson wanted to be strong, in-your-face, direct and aggressive. Horseman wanted to press high and counter at pace. And Deeney, Deeney just wanted to bully his own players. There was no joined-up thinking at any stage though, and it left Forest Green recruiting players to play in one style and system, and then asking them to do something completely different, only the following week. Not only has there been an extraordinary managerial turnover, Richard Hughes' replacement, Stevie Grieve, lasted just 5 months himself, and his successor, Alan Steele, was only in the job for 9 months. Head of recruitment, William Daniels, who spent 20 years in his previous job as a senior sports trader at Spreadex, was gone within 9 months at Forest Green. What Forest Green built over 12 years, in terms of a solid and, yes, sustainable foundation, was undermined so quickly by a few poor decisions. But all is not lost. In fact, you would do well to find another team that could suffer back-to-back relegations and still support their ownership and be as philosophical about that collapse as the majority of Forest Green Rovers fans. The National League is nothing new to Forest Green. Before winning promotion in 2017, they were the longest-serving team in the division. 12 years ago, they would have been happy just to have a club by 2024, let alone one that has tasted EFL and even League One football. That's not to say that there isn't discontent, of course there is. It is just a tempered discontent, helped by the fact that there is no indication that Vince is going to turn his back on the club. A new stadium and training ground, fit for championship football, has long been Vince's aim, as part of a £100 million business, sporting and industrial project, and whilst the eco-friendly world's first timber stadium keeps on getting pushed back, much to Vince's frustration, he announced following relegation that the training ground should be complete by July, in time for Forest Green to begin their pre-season training. In some ways, Forest Green have done a full 180. From being uniquely data-driven and with a modern director of football system in the National League a decade ago, now they are happy to give Steve Cottrell an unusual degree of control within the modern game, handing him the reins as an old-school manager rather than a modern head coach, in a bid to keep hold of him. Despite their modest support, Forest Green generates impressive commercial revenue for a club of their size. In a world of gambling, crypto and airline football sponsors, Forest Green are almost uniquely attractive to eco-friendly and meat-free brands, not least due to the global support that they have gained as a result of their ethos. They will do well to average over 2,500 fans at their home games next season, but Forest Green are reported to have around 100 supporters groups worldwide. So, it's a mixed picture at Forest Green Rovers. That third star getting coloured in feels an awfully long way away, but by the same token, this doesn't feel like a club that has just suffered successive relegations. The world may be burning, and sea levels rising, but there are still some green shoots of optimism in, where is it again? For crying out loud. That's it. The Cotswolds, Gloucestershire. Look, just route your sat-nav to Stroud, you'll get there eventually. That is it for today's video, but thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. I hope that was the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and of course, it goes without saying at this stage, make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, not just for this channel, HITC Sevens, but also my second channel, Alfie Potama, which is about to get its first video, trying to get it to 25,000 subscribers before that. So if you could help a brother out, I would be very grateful. That should be on your screens now, along with a couple of videos you might fancy watching after this one. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram or Threads via the username at HITC Sevens on all three, and all of those links plus a whole lot more good stuff should be down in the video description below. Cheers.